Hello and welcome back to this SlimDevOps episode 11.
11. It's amazing.
Yes, it is. And we've almost got the music intro right. For a moment there, Peter, everyone could hear you saying, hello, Yannick.
I know. I should have just been singing or something, Now I'm that would be a good trick that you could play on me sometime. Just turn my audio on without letting me know.
No, we never do that.
Bad form in streaming land.
So if you're watching this on YouTube, this was recorded live on twitch.tv/SlimDevOps on August the 26th. So if you want to join these sessions live and interact with us, come and follow us over on Twitch. So what you're going to be seeing is an as recorded live workshop. So Peter, what are we going... Well, in fact, before we get into what are we going to be doing today, we've got a little bit of housekeeping. So we've got... next week, we will have Gillian, who is our head of culture at Slim, on this live stream with me and John O'Bacon. And we're going to be talking about open source communities, team culture and authenticity. So I'm really looking forward to this. I had a chat with Gillian earlier where we sort of batted some ideas around for the discussion. For those of you in the chat, hello by the way, welcome back. Monica, you may well want to put a marker in your diary for that one because I think this overlaps very much with what you do. So that's what's coming up next. But what are we doing today?
So we're gonna do a Containers 101 workshop. So Martin and I have been kind of practicing this all day, and hopefully it goes as expected. Of course it won't, but that's okay. That's part of the fun of doing like a live coding workshop. So. But yeah, this was something, we've been doing a lot of these kind of how to slim containers and, advanced and basic techniques. And what we realized, we kind of skipped a step, which is just like, what are containers and how do you get started with them? And so, yeah, see a bunch of people in the chat who, we've been kind of, talking about this idea with for a while. So it's kind of cool to see it come to fruition. So we'll get into that and we'll see how that goes. Yeah, I'm kind of curious on your side, Martin, like how did you ever get involved with containers in the first place? Like what was your starting point?
Okay, so my first introduction to containers was a few jobs back when I worked in aviation and we were developing a flight safety monitoring solution that needed to scale in a way that I hadn't scaled servers before. And this was before, Docker existed. It was certainly before Kubernetes existed. So we were using OpenVZ as the way to make containers. And it was a little bit more sophisticated than CH roots, but not much more sophisticated than CH roots. So yeah, the way that containers were created back then was to literally sort of bootstrap a minimal Linux OS inside a CH root and create a tarball. I suppose the proto Docker, although Docker makes use of, some of the more exotic kernel features to do, execution isolation and all of that good stuff. So that's where my container journey started. And curiously, that was up until that was for quite a long time, and then for about most of 2016 I was using Docker quite extensively at a different job, and then I joined Canonical towards the end of 2016, and all of my container experience from 2016 until a few months ago was every container technology except Docker. So although I'm familiar with, what containers are and the benefits of containers, and I understand the primitives, I consider myself a Docker newbie because I haven't used Docker itself that much. What about you? How did you come to get involved in containers?
Yeah, so I guess similar industry or random industry. I was working in the publishing industry, and we didn't have any developers. So I learned Python through the Zed Shaw book, Python the hard way, which is really just like, step one, type Python, step two, print hello world, and that kind of thing. So but we started developing digital products using Python and web servers and stuff like that. And since I didn't have any like engineering support, I had to like get them up to AWS myself. And I really had no idea how to do it. And this is like 2014. And so I came across an article that was like, use Docker to ship your containers or ship your applications to the cloud. And I was like, oh, let me try that. I have no idea what it is, but I can write this Docker file. And I never really got it to work. I ended up like using AWS for something else. And then I kind of gave up on it because I just really didn't have a tutorial. I didn't have anything, anybody to kind of hold my hand and walk me through it. So it wasn't until I came back to Slim that I started working with Docker again. So it's been cool to jump back into it. I feel like I've known about Docker for a long time, but I'm also still fairly new to it. And so this will be an interesting, and I would have wished we had this kind of 101 workshop while I was learning. So.
Yeah, and so for those of you that are in here, if you have container experience, let us know in the chat, where you started with containers and what your motivations were. It's always interesting to hear those origin stories because it may inform the discussions that we have a little bit later on. So with that, we have this workshop prepared. So it's on GitHub, so github.com, and then you can see at the top here, it's SlimDevOps / Slim-containers. I'm just going to open this up over here.
Post a link to it in the chat here. So
nice one. That's great.
Also seeing people are drinking. We got some drinking tea. We got some we have some rice balls, some tar balls. I'm drinking some sparkling seltzer here. So
yes, yeah. I've gone for the classic tap water.
oh, fine vintage.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's a novel release, right then. So with that, let's get into this a little bit. So we're going to be using this containers 101 directory, and this is where all of the content that's going to inform today's discussion resides. So where do we start with this? Containers is a big topic. We're going to try and break this down. So we're going to start at the very beginning, I think.
Yeah. Our goal today is to literally create a container and, if we're lucky, push it to Docker Hub. We're going to do it a few different ways, including the wrong way. So I think we're taking a little inspiration from Python the hard way. We're going to do containers the hard way. And then we'll go from there, and we'll make it easier as it goes. We won't get into a lot of things around slimming or volumes or kind of networking protocols. We're not going to touch Kubernetes at all. We'll kind of deal with those things in future iterations. There's a lot of cool stuff that's coming out in the kind of container space around build kits and different automation features and stuff like that. But we're going to start super, super easy. And yeah, Big Pod's already ahead of the curve with its single node kube cluster. So Kubernetes will not come up in this. So if you're hoping for a Kubernetes intro, it won't be in this one. We're just really going to start with containers and create those and go from there. But look forward to more of these workshops. We really want to refine them and get them right over time. So yeah, so do you want to just jump in and we can start with just like, what is a container, right? Like how do we,
if you start talking, I will fire up a browser here and put everything in the right place so we can take
Sure. Yeah. So for people who are completely uninitiated, I think everybody, who's in chat right now, but please tell us if we don't, if we need to take another step back, but sort of are familiar with Ubuntu or different Linux operating systems and sort of know what containers are designed to do. But, we can think of them like a separate operating system that just lives on your local host. Different than VMs, right? A VM is going to it's emulating a computer. Right. Whereas, I think I read this quote on Twitter the other day, like a VM is emulating a computer, a container is emulating an operating system. And then there's some new technologies that are coming out that are trying to emulate, say, a single process or something like that. We're not going to get into a ton of what are the actual differences between like a VM and and open source software, all we need to do is think of a container as a single, ephemeral, hopefully self-contained unit of software that's on your computer that you can add your app to, and it's going to standardize all of the dependencies for you. It's going to manage all of your dependencies, keep everything sort of in a single state, and make it really easy for you to run your application on any hardware, anywhere. And that's the goal. That's what we're thinking about for a container. Now, we're going to use Docker. We mentioned a couple of the different container technologies. There's always new ones. There's the Containerd project, which is an open source project. There's a lot of new stuff happening in containers, a lot of old stuff, as we've been discussing, people are discussing in the chat. Docker is kind of the most popular, and it's the thing that everybody uses. You can see kind of, this was the origin meme of Docker, which is the old "it works on my machine" kind of problem, where your app works on your machine, you send it to someone else, say you put it up on an Amazon EC2 instance, and suddenly it stops working because you have a different library version, you have a different dependency, you have some version of C that maybe it doesn't expect. Docker was meant to kind of solve all of that and make it easy with easy command line tooling and a good interface. Though on Linux, I think, Martin, you pointed out that the interface that you get on Mac OS and Windows is not available for Linux folks. So we'll not take that personally here.
Considering that containers are focused on delivering apps using Linux, it's a bit of a slap in the face. We're treated like peasants with the sexy graphical user interfaces. So a stream idea I've got coming up for next week on this channel is I'm going to be looking at some of the community created Docker graphical user interfaces, and I'm gonna do a quick review of those, get some feedback, and then choose which is the best graphical front end for Docker on Linux for those who are interested in that stuff.
That's awesome. We'll look forward to that. Oh yeah, it looks like Diddle Dan's mentioning Podman, which is another popular one. So but yeah, we're going to run through Docker. So if you have Docker installed, you should be able to do this. Looks like Monica, is that the Hello World, the Docker Hello World example, or are you talking about the one that we have in this tutorial? She's already run through the entire tutorial in the first 5 minutes of the show. I think that means
at the head of our tutorial, we had these steps for installing Docker and making sure it works, which includes the step Docker run hello world to make sure the sort of the hello world of containers is functional. So if you follow those steps there, then you have Docker working, and you're going to be able to break the rest of the tutorials later.
Perfect. All right. Well, also in the tutorial, and I'll finish here, just there's some basic terminology around Docker and just some really useful commands. So, I mean, if you're just getting into Docker, so Monica, you have Hello World running now, things like Docker run, Docker pull, Docker build. These are the commands you're going to be using most of the time. Once you start using Docker, you'll use Docker prune or Docker images and stuff like that, because Docker does take up a lot of space when you're pulling images left and right and stuff like that. But, this is kind of a quick start guide, just kind of like a cheat sheet for people who are trying to use the Docker command line. But with that, Martin, you want to get us into our workshop?
So what we're going to do is use a simple application that I created, and we are going to start by... Very good, Peter. I approve. When I said we should have a Mandalorian meme in here, I didn't expect that you would go off and create the perfect image, but there it is. So
we're going to do twice for memes. So
we are going to deliberately do it the wrong way, but by doing it the wrong way, we're doing it in a way that is going to be familiar to Ubuntu users. So that is the purpose of this. And once we've done it the wrong way and explained what we're doing to create a container, we're then going to transfer what we've just done to the right way. So without further ado, I'm going to bring a terminal down here. Let's put you there, and let's put you there. That should give us enough space to see what we're doing. So I'll just make this terminal font a bit bigger. Maybe we should do the same here as well. There we go. Hopefully that's all visible in the stream just fine. So the first thing we're going to do is actually get the latest Ubuntu Docker image, simply with docker pull Ubuntu latest. Ubuntu being the name of the image that we want, and latest being the tag that we want. If you go and look at the Ubuntu images on Docker Hub, you'll see there are different tags for the different releases, but latest is the current LTS, up to date. Now, I ran this earlier, but you'll find once you have pulled that command, if you run that command, if you type in Docker images, you will see that we have an image here, Ubuntu latest. It was created 4 weeks ago, and it's 72.8 megabytes. So what we're going to do now is just shell into our Ubuntu container. So docker run -i-t. Gosh, what was this? This was setting up the TTYs and things like that so that you can open a terminal into the container. And if we do that, here we are. We are now root inside the container. So at this point, you can do anything you like in here. Anything that you do in here is adding new information to a container based on Ubuntu latest. You are not modifying Ubuntu latest. A new instance of a container has been created, and any changes that you make are being made to that new instance. No changes are being made to your host operating system. So that's the first important thing. And in fact, what we've got here is this here is the container ID. As you can see, the container ID or the image ID for Ubuntu latest is here. And we, by running the shell, created a new instance, and this is this container's ID. And we will need this later. You don't need to write it down or anything. There are other ways to rediscover this later, but we are in a different container than the one that we just pulled down. So hopefully those of you following along understand. So, what is in this Ubuntu container? Well, we can run apt-list, and these are all of the packages that are resident inside this container image that contain this minimal Ubuntu. If you've downloaded Ubuntu for the desktop, it's 2 gigabytes. We're running Ubuntu in a container here in 72 megabytes. Clearly there's a difference. And, you can almost list all of the packages on one page. But what's important to note, and what is consistent with what Pieter was saying earlier, is if we look for Linux-related packages, we'll see that the SE Linux is in there, which is one of the security providers, and Util Linux is there, but there is no Linux kernel, because this is not a virtual machine where we are emulating the whole operating system. The container is using the kernel from the host operating system. So no kernel required, no firmware required. It's all using your host. And therefore, we can think of container performance. This is a massive oversimplification, but you can think of container performance as being native, the same performance as you would get if you were running the application directly on your machine.
Cool.
So we can mess around in here and have a look at the OS.
Yeah, I just want to say hi to A. Hazen and Jeff Gila. Welcome, guys. So we're going through a Containers 101, just kind of getting started with containers the wrong way first, and then we're going to get to the right way. Yannick makes the note, no host operating system has been harmed in the making of this container. and our podcast says, I'm pretty harsh with my containers. Someday I'll be nice to them. And I think that is not that we want to bash containers. I don't know if that's a pun or not, but yeah, I mean, containers are ephemeral, right? So when they're running, you can kind of beat them up a little bit. You can test them, you can do different things to them. And then when you shut them down and exit them, they're just going to go away. So it's not like you're kind of like mucking up your whole operating system when you're doing stuff to the container that you have running. Now, if it's something you want to use later, then yeah, be a little careful with it. But Yeah, that's exactly the point.
This will be familiar with Ubuntu users. Let's update our container. So we'll just run these two commands. It will run an update and then the upgrade immediately afterwards. So that updates the apt cache repository and then installs the 4 outstanding updates. And there we go. We have just updated our container in exactly the same way you would ordinarily. Now, of course, we can't get any serious work done in a container without the best editor and Git. So we'll install Nano and Git. And that obviously adds a bunch of stuff to our container now.
Yeah, the Nano versus Vim. We're not going to get into it. We've already done R versus Python. We're not getting into Nano versus Vim versus any of the others. But
I'm more than happy to get into the argument about Nano versus anything because I'm right.
I see. We'll continue that. Continue that discussion in Discord.
So what we're going to do now, we're still inside the container. So we're going to clone my project, which is a very simple bit of Python. And if we, let's use the glorious Nano editor. In fact, let's change into the right directory. If we edit the Python, it's pure Python and its purpose is simple. This is something I wrote for what I do with OBS. It basically, you give it a YouTube channel ID and it will redirect you to the live chat for that YouTube channel ID. And that's all it does. And it's a way of seamlessly integrating YouTube chat into OBS. It doesn't really matter what it does, but it's a simple, in air quotes, web app written in Python.
So it's just it's just a self-contained Python file. It takes some input, it does something, and then it gives some response, and that's all it does.
And in fact, let's try and run it. So if we try and run it here, the channel ID I'm using here is actually for the Minecraft gaming community on YouTube. So there is always someone streaming there. Consequently, there is always a live chat there. So if I run that, oh, well, that's disappointing because we have no Python. You know, the container was very small. It didn't include Python. So now let's install Python 3. So Python 3-minimal is the bare essentials Python. So then that's installed. And now if we run the command again, it says it's running. And if I now go to localhost 8008 in this browser, oh, it's not working. Well, that's strange. So what's going on there? Well, the issue is that we need to actually bind the TCP ports from the container. So what we're going to do now is we're going to quit the application and exit the container. So we're returning back to the host operating system. And what we're going to do now is we have a container instance with all of those changes inside it. So let's just go and look at that. If we do docker ps-a, we'll be able to see all of the containers. And here it is. Here's our container ID, and we can see it was derived from Ubuntu latest, and you know, it was given a name. So what we're going to do is this command here, this will vary slightly based on the ID that you had. Oh, hang on a minute. I've got words on the end there that shouldn't be there. So what we're doing is we're going to say commit the container ID to the name, redirect live chat, because that's the name of my app, and we're going to add the tag the wrong way, okay, to clearly let ourselves know this is not the container you're looking for. Do you love all the Star Wars references? I hear there are no Star Trek fans in the chat today, so I can totally go overboard with
Nano versus Vim, now Star Trek versus Star Wars. Here we go.
Oh, we're going to do cats versus dogs later as well.
Dogs, definitely. Now, so just to be clear on what we just did, right? So we took a container image, Ubuntu latest, and we pulled it, and then we created a container from that image, right? And then we shelled into that container using the docker run -it command, right? And then you made some changes just from the command line of that container, from that shell.
Yes.
And when you exited that container, what Docker did was it stopped that container, but that container instance was still there.
Yes.
So then with this commit command, what you did was you created a new container image off of those changes that you had made in that container. Is that all right?
That's all correct. So if we now run Docker images, what we can, we need a bit more screen real estate for the terminal here. let's just maximize this whilst we do this bit. So if you look at Docker images, you can see we started with this container here, which is 72 megabytes. We derived from it, shelled into, the instance that was created, and we have now just saved this container, and it is 242 megabytes because we have installed the best editor and Git and Python and my tiny application. So consequently, it's bigger. So that is what we've done so far. And what we will do now is run our container image. So we're going to use Docker run. Let's actually do this here. So Docker run. We're going to map the port. So my application by default runs on port 8008. So here we're simply saying bind the host port 8008 to this container that we're about to launch. You've seen the IT command before. We're now going to use the container redirect live chat, and in this case we're going to do the wrong way.
Yeah, and so Ollie makes the Ollie's in the chat. He says, "You say this is the wrong way, but I didn't know you could do this." And yeah, just to be clear, we're doing it this way because we feel like a lot of people will be familiar with Ubuntu, and then we're going to get into Dockerfile after this, because Dockerfile really actually makes it so you don't have to do all this manual step and these manual efforts. A lot of people just start with Dockerfile. But if you're just starting with a Dockerfile, you might not really understand like what the container is or where it lives and stuff like that. The other thing is Yannick made a mention of the name. So Docker has a pretty fun naming convention. So I think if you look at Martin's, the name of the container is like Stupefied Keller or something like that. And Docker just comes up with all these random names. It looks like Zen Tesla is the one that Yannick did. So.
Okay, so we're now going to say start the container that we saved momentarily, and instead to shelling into the container, we're going to we're going to execute the app itself. So it's redirect. It's in the direct. What we're saying is inside the container, run this command. So I checked out the source code for my Git into the root of the container. So therefore it exists in redirect live chat. And the command is redirect live chat.py, typos. And my application has a command line argument. And this just is basically bind to all IP addresses. The only reason I'm telling you to do this is it doesn't matter if you're using Wi-Fi or whatever your exotic, network configuration is. This should work for you. It's just a bit of simplification. And then we need our YouTube channel ID, which we will just paste on the end here. So now this should run our app from that container. And there we go. So now it says my application is running on localhost. So if I go back to the browser here, I hope nobody is saying bad things in this live chat right now, because there we go. It's all hearts and smiley faces. How good. So there we go. I ran my app, and you can see down here, we hit my app and it did the redirect, and therefore the browser I was connecting from took me to that live chat. So there it is. Cool. Success. Well done, everyone. You've made your first Docker container. The wrong one.
Well, nice. Well, Monica mentioned that she might have had a little of issue. So yeah, I'm not sure the error. So Docker commit requires at least one and at most two arguments. Maybe check and make sure. So the one thing is that container ID is going to be unique to your machine, right? Because so I don't know if you maybe copied the exact one, or maybe check and make sure you copied the right thing there.
So Monica, I've just highlighted the command that you need to run in blue on the screen. And you'll notice that after it says Docker images. There should be a carriage return there. That's a separate command. So you just need the Docker commit, the container ID, and then the name you're going to give the container, the tag name, and that should work. So that's our mistake for not having a carriage return on that piece there. We'll fix that after the fact, hopefully.
Dan posted a pretty fun Docker in Docker, which I think definitely qualifies for our more advanced workshops. But it's funny that you bring that up, Dan, because I was trying to get Snap installed on the Ubuntu image so that we could like play a game like Pac-Man or something like that, and do that as the example. But I couldn't get Snap to run inside the container because it is a container itself. So we're aligned. We were trying to do that, but I'll take a look at that in a second.
Right, so that's the wrong way. Let's do it the right way. So what we're going to do is we're just going to Control-C. And Monica says she's got it. Well done, Monica. Hopefully everyone's all on the same page here. Also, I see there's quite a few people in the live chat. If you're new here, please do pop into the chat, raise your hand and say hello. We're a friendly crowd. It's always good to know who's joining for the first time, who's returning. We like to try and get to know the names of everyone here, so we can get familiar with the sorts of things you're working on and the projects that you're interested in. So we're now going to redo this tutorial the right way, and this way is the Ubuntu way, and we're going to use a Docker file. So what we're going to do is, if I go to my own development directory, I have cloned the project. So I should have probably put the git clone command in there. That's typical, isn't it? So you will need to do this on your you'll need to do this on your host machine. So I will that's the command you need to run.
Yep. And this is also like, if we did tell people this was kind of like a bring your own app. And so like, now that we're getting into the Docker file, if you have your own app, ideally it's a Python app so that this is kind of apples to apples. But if you have other apps, like this is a place where you could kind of take where Martin's app is and put your own app in. You might have your own problems, but we want to hear them and we can try to help you work through them. We'll work on ways to make this like more interactive and be able to share each other's apps and stuff like that. But this is kind of the part of it where like, if you just take the Docker file that we're building and you kind of change it up for your programming language or whatever, or for your app, you should be able to do that and try to run a very basic Docker container from that.
Yeah.
Ollie, from your question, if I installed Snap on this app, I'd get a command I can run on the host. Does Docker have that instead of typing that long command? I'm not sure if I know the answer to that or if I understand that. So maybe people in chat can help.
Ali says, okay, if I installed a snap of this app, I'd get a command that I can run on the host. Does Docker have? So that would be like aliasing. I don't actually know. I suspect so, but I tell you what, I'll find out and I will do a mini stream on that very topic next week. That sounds like a good short little bit of investigation.
It's also something that I think Docker tends to handle through like compose files, which we won't get in here. So when you have like more complicated apps, like definitely Docker, when you're first learning it, there's a lot of command line flags and things that you need to know. So it gets a little confusing. When you kind of start using compose a little more, you're kind of like more declaratively saying things in YAML, and then it kind of just fires things up the way you expect them to. So we'll try to show that like at a future version at some point too.
Yeah. And we will see that the command line becomes less complex. Now we start using a Docker file and we describe how the app inside the Docker file should be executed. And we'll be getting to that in just a moment.
Yep.
Right then. So if you have cloned my repository, we can now check out. So this is the Docker file that we're going to use. So let's just start here. So this is a Docker file that does exactly what we just did in the shell by shelling into our Docker container. So instead of saying docker pull Ubuntu latest, we say from Ubuntu latest. So we're telling Docker to use that base image. Then we do our update and our upgrade. We then install our editor and Git. Then we install Python 3, the minimal version. And then we inject our app into the container. And then we define the entry point. And the entry point is basically when I run this container, what is the command or commands that get started by Docker. So you won't need to create the Dockerfile moniker because as a young boy, I grew up watching Blue Pieter. So here's one we prepared earlier. in the redirect live chat Git repository, there is a branch called the Ubuntu way. So you can check out that branch. And now if you edit the Docker file, you will find exactly the Docker file that we have just talked through from the notes already to go. And that's it. So hopefully, for those of you that are familiar with Ubuntu, going through those shell steps and now looking at the analog here in the Docker file, you can see what these things mean, in the Docker file and how that relates to Ubuntu.
Mm-hmm.
If anyone's got any questions on that, or I've
I can
not been
address
clear.
a couple. Yeah, so I think Hazen came in and said that he thought that we were talking more about the Docker Compose kind of side of it. Yannick brought up something that I think is illustrative. So, if you alias something like Docker run, blah, 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 in your alias, you're actually going to be creating a new container every single time that you run that, which I think is important, like an important nuance, right? There's images, and Dockerfile creates a Docker image, right, through the build command. Docker run, an image is like a set of instructions, right? And so you're going to run the Docker image to create the container, and the container is going to be its own thing. And so Ollie mentioned that every time he runs Docker, he has like 100 images and he runs out of hard drive space really fast. And this happens to me on almost like a daily basis whenever I'm doing any kind of scripting with Docker, because you need to be really careful about sort of Docker management. Otherwise, you do run out of space, which is you need to kind of shut down and kill off containers to take them out of memory when you're done with them, or get rid of images. There is a command, prune. You could do Docker images prune or Docker container prune to get rid of your images. But it's also like if you're doing Python scripting or something like that, you need to make sure that you're shutting down and taking out the images that you're not using. Otherwise, you're just going to keep creating more of them and you'll run out of space. So.
And we didn't want to get into that too much today because we just wanted to cover the basics of creating an image, running a container. But I think that's an interesting point that maybe we can dedicate a future live stream to, just sort of covering maybe like Docker hygiene,
Yeah.
Okay, so hopefully you have checked out my repository. You have checked out the branch called the Ubuntu way, and now we will build this Docker image. So this is the command, docker build -t. This is creating a new image. It will be called redirect live chat with the tag the Ubuntu way, and the dot means from this Docker file in the directory that I'm currently in. If you're familiar with Unix, you understand what that's all about. So let's just run that and build a container. So this is going to whiz by quite quickly, but there you go. It went and used the Ubuntu base image. It's now running our update and our upgrade. And here we go. Now we're doing the updates themselves. And a bit further down here, we're now installing Nano and Git. So that's all of those packages being installed, of which there will be a considerable number. And maybe I've missed there we go. And here's the part where Python 3 gets installed. And Are we done with Python 3 yet? Yes, we are. Here's where our app gets inserted into the container and the entry point is created. And then it says we've successfully tagged redirect live chat the Ubuntu way. So if we now run, in fact, I'll just make this full screen. We now run Docker images. We can now see we have a new Docker image here with a new image ID, and it's 243 megabytes. This is interesting. I've done this 3 times now just to check, and each time, for whatever reason, the version from the Docker file comes out 1 megabyte larger. I don't know why, but there it is.
What's in your container matters. We've been telling people what you put in your container matters, right?
Excellent. Monica says success again. That flew by. Well, that's good to know. Excellent. So if we just move back here, we can now run this container. So the command is much the same, in fact, almost identical, except we're changing the tag name. So if we run this, it's binding the port here, as we discussed earlier. It's using the Ubuntu way tagged image, my app, but you'll notice this time we're not giving it the path to the application to launch, because that's defined by the Docker file, by the entry point command, entry point stanza, which is this just here. So there's no need to tell the container what to run. It already knows that. So at this point, the -a is the start of the arguments to my app. So bind every network interface and then use this YouTube channel ID. So if we do that, it now says that container is running. We go up here and type in localhost 8008. Oh, there we go. It just took a little while. There we go. Good. So it hasn't redirected yet. Let's just do... Have I broken something? Huh. This is annoying. You know that thing where you test a bunch of stuff and then you can't do it for reals and it's not working?
And it should literally be the exact same thing in the
yes.
as the other one, right?
What did I miss out? What have I not done correctly?
Dan was asking the config on the entry point file. I don't know that we send a config to that, do we?
No, we don't.
Yeah, because then...
Thank you, Monica. Okay, well, that's perplexing because I tested this earlier. So what's missing there?
we could go totally sideways and do Docker logs to see if there's anything that showed up in the logs. Site can't connect.
You know what it could be? Is it possible that I've actually got an existing Docker PS mode? Have I got an earlier version running? No, they've all exited.
Yeah, it usually fails if you've already bound that port to
I was
something.
expecting, but I just thought I'd check. Okay. So the container is this one. Oh, that's the only logs, which is from my app, so not a whole lot to go on.
Not helpful.
Let's just redirect check the interlake. I assume if that's correct. Let's just take a quick look.
Ubuntu way, the wrong way.
Let's just remove this for fun. See if it still goes. Okay. Bother. How frustrating is that? 8,008. I didn't need to do that. No. I absolutely need the -a on my command. Wow. So it's working on Yannick's setup. So
something to do with
I'm going to put that
testing
down to something quirky going on my machine, because there really is nothing wrong here. It is entirely possible, because I've got
feels
a
more like a
multi-home
connectivity
system
issue or
here.
something.
Yeah. So maybe there's something I haven't done with my network configuration that I should have considered earlier.
Maybe all the myriad people who are doing this here on the stream and out on the internet are overwhelming that API endpoint at YouTube for the single chat. That's my guess.
That's it. Our 22 viewers on Twitch are overwhelming YouTube. But
Definitely.
What I'm
Good
seeing
work,
here
guys.
is that the people that are following along, that they have a working container image, so that's good.
Yeah.
So
take off. Hey.
What we're going to do now is the same container, but we're going to use a different base image. Now we've talked about base images here a few times. Yannick's just try another port. All right, okay. So is it mapping which is inside and which is outside? I can never remember. Is the outside that one?
I'd get it wrong. I would guess, but I would just get it wrong. So
let's try local host.
First one is the host. The chat comes to the rescue. Thanks, Ranjan.
Oh, I've done it backwards then. Okay, so
I'd be quick on the Google on that one, but thankfully everybody in the chat knows this.
So it's host to container.
Yeah.
Okay. 8009. No dice. It is what it is. You never know.
It just looks like some sort of connectivity issue between.
Yeah, I have too many network
service
interfaces and VLANs configured here. I probably overcomplicated this for myself slightly. So we're going to use a different base image. So we spoke about this when we talked about on I think it was the last stream, choosing the starting place for your container, and we talked about what we've just done, which is starting with sort of a general purpose OS image. And then the next step we talked about was choosing an image which was maintained by sort of a language community, where they take a popular language and prefabricate a container with that language and some of its tooling already, wrapped up neatly for you. So we're going to do this with Python, and this time we're going to use the base image Python, and we want to use the Python 3 Slim image. Now I've put a link to Docker Hub to the Python base images. If you go and look there, you will be overwhelmed by the number of tags that are available. There are a cornucopia of Python revisions available, and also on slightly different Debian bases. So this is a Debian based image. So it looks a lot like the Docker file we just created, except we're using the Python 3 Slim image. We do the update and the upgrade. We're installing Nano and Git. We should point out, for those of you that are familiar with Docker images, there is no requirement to actually install Nano and Git into your container that you're building for production. We've just left it here for the purposes of consistency with what we did in the shelled into container earlier.
And if we did take that out, the container would be significantly smaller, because those are fairly large packages and so you would never really have that in a production ready container, but we're kind of, getting the beginning.
And
going.
in fact, for fun, after we've built this one, maybe we could build it again without that in there and just see what the size difference looks like. And then you'll notice what we're not doing is we're not installing any Python into this container, because we're using a container that already has Python installed. And in fact, if we just do Docker images, you can see I pulled this image earlier, and here it is, and it is 122 megabytes because it has Python already in it, versus the 72 megabytes from Ubuntu, which is just enough operating system and no Python. So we don't have any Python installed, but we have the exact same inject my app and create the entry point. So just like before, here's one we made earlier. So if you check out the Python way, and now you can go and look at the Docker file. Here is the Docker file in the project that we have in the notes there. So we're going to build this image, and here we go. So it's just the same as before, except this time we've changed the tag to the Python way. So let's build that image. Broadly speaking, the same steps are going to run. Pulls down the base image, or uses the base image that I've already got on my system in this case. Does the apt update, installs Nano and Git, injects the app, creates the entry point, and there we go, we're done. So if you're following along, you should be at that point, or your system is just catching up.
Takeoff suggested you prune the images, your dangling images, so you either remove the images that are there already. Maybe there's a port conflict or something, and then you network stuff. So maybe try that for this one, and we'll see if that helps with the running.
Should we try that now?
Yeah. I think you can do just Docker container prune, and that should remove anything that's dangling or stopped.
Well, let's see what we've got. We don't have any, and prune. Warning, this will remove all stopped containers. That's fine, I think. Okay, so Docker. PS-A, nothing there. Docker images, there we go. So we now have these 3 images that are ostensibly the same. One made through manually invoking the shell, one made with Ubuntu as our starting point, and one made with a prefabricated Python container based on Debian. And what you can see here is this is ever so slightly smaller. Look, we've got a container which is 229 megabytes for the Python base image derived versus 243 for Ubuntu. So let's just do Docker run, and let's run it as we had it. So I'm running the Ubuntu way at the moment just to see if this works. Let's see if pruning up the containers worked. 8008. No. Thank you for the suggestion.
Yeah. Ranjan says we could also remove any dangling networks, though I'll admit I don't know the command for that. So maybe if somebody helps us out in the chat.
Ranjan, if you know the
he says it worked.
You're working. Okay. Good. So,
it
did work. There's the redirect. There's the redirect.
Magic.
It did work. It just took a little while. So, okay. Well, let's run the Python way, which is the container that we just made using the Python base image. Who else is at this point, and have you got a functioning third container?
Yeah, it looks like Yannick and Monica both got theirs working.
Fabulous.
Seems like from the chat. So
I'm in the same position again. Look, so I think we'll do that.
Curious that we got this running, because I guess we weren't sure it was going to.
To be fair, when I ran through this, it was in the other office where I've only got a single network interface.
Oh, okay.
Oh no, that's not right. No, I did it here, didn't I? Because I did the final run through here. Oh well.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do the Docker container prune.
Yeah.
Let's run it again the Python way. There it is. And now let's go back to localhost, and it works. Okay, I will have to investigate that and find out why that is now working. But thank you very much for the suggestion. We are working, and hopefully you all are as well.
Yay! Yeah, it does highlight a couple just things for working with Docker, and once you get some facility with it, right? The complicated part parts about Docker are not necessarily making the containers. Making the containers is pretty straightforward. The complicated part is getting them to work together, to manage them on your machine, to set up networks and work with volumes and all that kind of stuff. So this like 101 is like, okay, we can create a container, we can put our app inside of it. Hopefully people have tried with their own apps and we want to hear how that goes. Drop into our Discord, chat with us, let us know how things went with your own apps. But in the future, we'll get into some more interesting, and not more interesting, but like more complicated stuff. And once you get into networking and volumes and stuff like that, it can get pretty complicated pretty quickly. So.
Okay, so I'm just commenting out the installation of Nano and Git, and we'll rebuild because we said let's just for the fun of it, let's just do the Python way, no Nano. Okay. Well, that ran a whole lot quicker. Oh, because these stages are cached, so a lot of this will run quicker. And if we just maximize this window and do Docker images, what difference did that make? Well, quite the difference. So now our Docker image is 146 megabytes.
Yeah.
So just for fun, let's do Git. I'm going to have to stash this. We'll Git check out the Ubuntu way, and we'll do the same thing. We will not install Nano and Git, and we will build that image as the Ubuntu way. Sorry, my camera is in the way, but the Ubuntu way, no Nano. Let's run that and see what we get. And if we do Docker images, there we go. We have 147 megabytes. So there we go. Really nothing in it without, so clearly Nano or Git on Ubuntu pulls in more dependencies on Ubuntu than it does on Debian. But there we go. We've managed to optimize our image ever so slightly. 1 megabyte is neither here nor there, really, is it?
Yeah. A. Heisen says, the caches and apt update are always a fun battle. And I think we did sort of a not best practices thing in the building of the Docker file where we put run commands on sort of every different line, which is going to create new layers for each of those pieces. And, if you've read Martin's Dev 2 article about container slimming basics, hopefully it makes a ton more sense now and why we would actually care about the order of the Docker file, because that's going to relate to the layers and the caching, and certainly doing the apt updates and stuff like that can run into some problems because you're changing the dependencies that were previously there. So
indeed. And Dan makes a point, there's another optimization. If we did want Nano and Git installed, we could tell apt to not install the recommended packages, and Dan is guessing that maybe Debian is pre-configured that way, or maybe that image is, But what we have here is, this is an article, there's a link to it from this tutorial, Creating Production-Ready Containers, the Basics, and this is really sort of the jumping off point from where we've got to here. So you have now got a container that works, or maybe 3 containers that work, and these are some steps about how to improve your Docker files to go like a little bit next level. So here, exposing the port rather than telling the app what to do at runtime, not running as root, not using, for example, latest, but using a specific version, because if you use latest, it could be that today when you build your app it's Python 3.9, and tomorrow when you build your app it's Python 3.10, and there is some kind of breaking change in the Python interpreter, and now your application is broken. So like pinning the revisions of the languages that you're using is a good thing to do. And then this gets into layer caching. But if you read this will probably make more sense to you than it would have done had you just read this without this little introduction we've given you.
Yeah. Our podcast mentions, he wants to get more efficient at the run command statements for rebuilding those images. And those data science images, I feel your pain on that. I've been doing some Python data science work recently. Those images are like 2 gigs. It really matters. It's like a 6-minute build time or rebuild time if you're not careful about sort of building those images. So I feel your pain on that. It's like, what do you do in 6 minutes? Like you can't switch to do something else and can't wait for it to get done. So yeah, it's super important for productivity.
And then down here, publishing your images, pushing your images to Docker Hub. So once you've made an application and you have a container, you can publish it so other people can use it. And this is like there's two ways to this. In this case, we have an application here. This is an app that people can, in air quotes, download and run. So if they want to self-host their thing, they can now do that. These are the commands to publish or push your container image. And if I just go to hub.docker.com, WinPress, I'm not logged in this session, so why did it not find me? Let's go over here. One mini moment. I will just pop out another browser thingy. One moment. Move to a new window. Let's just resize that slightly. I'll bring this over here. Here's one I logged into earlier.
There you go.
So what we have here is my redirect live chat app, and the version that I've pushed up is the Python way. So there it is. So you could, without having to build the app locally, you can now just Docker pull that app and then Docker run that app. Mm-hmm. And that's a nice way to build infrastructure. We talked about this last week, these building blocks of infrastructure that you can use as sort of, macro Lego bricks to create infrastructure.
Yep. And just as a reminder, so Docker Hub is great, and you can connect to it through the Docker command line login tool. You'll need an account. And if you have the free account, your images are going to be public. So just, fair warning, disclaimer, these images don't have anything in them that is, dangerous or anything like that. So we're not too worried about that. But if you are doing your own app, just know that container is going to be public unless you pay for the private repository or store them on a different registry somewhere that does have a private instance. So just a fair word of warning.
Yeah. And if you're curious about registries and containers, we did do a session on this recently on the SlimDevOps. So this was done here, and here we go. So episode 8, I'll just hit pause. Episode 8, containers and registries. If you want to learn a little bit more about what container registries and repositories are, where you can get them, who provides them, which are public, how you have private images, then we covered all of this here.
Yep. Dan makes the point you can also put them up on GitHub or GitLab, and we also have a blog post that's related to the Twitch show that runs through some of those options too, including self-hosting, like our podcast mentions, where there's Harbor and there's the Docker registry project and stuff like that have really awesome sort of, you want to roll your own
in our blog, or is it?
Yeah, I think it's the one with the lock photo on it, probably right there. Yeah. So runs through some options
additional reading material there as well.
Yeah. But this has been great. How did everybody think the workshop was? Were we successful? Was it interesting? I'm glad we got so much participation. I'm glad we had some people who were very knowledgeable as well, who could help us kind of keep us on track where we lost it a little bit. But great.
Excellent. thank you for the feedback. I'm glad that was helpful for you. Yeah, I don't know why was there two of me. I don't know why that was. We're getting it's Wimpy's inside containers and containers inside Wimpy's at that point, isn't it? Right, so that's our starting position, right? This was the very first starting place. I think we've probably learned that maybe the next one of these will look into Docker hygiene. You know, how do you, and also something that you talked about, Peter, which would be kind of interesting is volumes. So maybe you have a container that's nice and small. You've got a nice small app, but you have terabytes of data you want that app to be able to access. So how do you get your container to talk to volumes of data that exist outside of the container? So, you know, it's all sort of storage related. So maybe we'll do a container storage and hygiene, one of these, where we just cover off some of those topics.
Yeah, I think that would be great. And networking as well. People mentioned networks a couple of times. Docker has some really cool networking capabilities to allow containers to talk to containers. And that's when you really start unlocking like the value of containers, is when you have, so I'm working on an app right now that just calls another app that's an open source project in a container. So now I don't have to worry about installing that app on my machine. I just run it from the container all the time and I run that. So I think that's a great topic, and yeah, let's flesh that out. So I'm glad people found it was cool. Takeoff, thank you for the comment. That's great. And yeah, we'll keep these going. This was super fun. So Martin, thank you so much for putting this together. It was awesome. I know it was a lot of work.
I think we had some fun, you know, figuring out how to present this. Now we did say people could bring their own apps and we'd look into it. Now we're an hour in. If anyone does have an app they want to make a container from, we could spend a bit of time looking at that. But if you don't have time to do that now, but you have an idea for an app you would like to make a container of, then come and join our Discord. You'll find the URL on the website above my head, and you can share the ideas of the containers that you'd like to have a go at making at, and maybe make a start yourself, and we will dive in there and help you if you run into any difficulties, and if we can't help you, we'll get some of our super talented engineers from work to come and help you out. We'll delegate the hard questions to the experts.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, if people want to drop into Discord, that's great. We're also looking for people who are putting containers and specifically container slimming capabilities, but we'll really talk to anybody into their CI pipelines right now. That's a real big area of interest for us, and we want to really make that work well for the SaaS product that we're building and stuff like that. So we could definitely do a CI version of the workshop at some point as well. Oh, Martin, now there's many of us. Nice.
I fixed it. Yes. So what Peter's referring to is our developer platform. And again, if you go to the URL above my head, you will see something like that. And we still have a few seats available for our early access. So if you want to get using our developer platform to do some of what we've introduced today, and also a whole lot more besides, particularly inspecting the composition of containers and how they differ between revisions, right the way down to the individual lines in the files that have changed. It's a very powerful feature if you're sort of doing containers at scale, or you're revving containers really fast. You get some great insight. So the link is there. I can't do that pointing in the right direction thing. They're over there. Come and sign up and give it a go. And again, drop into our Discord and share your experiences. We've got a feedback section there. We'd love to hear how you get on. And also, Awesome. We'd love to hear if there's a feature that you really want that you can't find in the platform. That's all useful information for us.
Yeah, and Big Pot, I'll definitely reach out about the CI stuff. I'll hit you on Discord shortly. So
yeah,
cool. And yes, Wimpy should definitely be a professional streamer. I can't tell you how much I've learned from him streaming, and just to watch him go about his business doing it is really impressive. So I'm very, very fortunate to get to stream with him. I feel like a learning all the time. So
I love our in my time, you know, Thursday evenings. I think this is the highlight of the week for me. You and I get to hang out and chat to people and play around with some stuff. It's good.
And thank you for everybody coming by for this too. This has been awesome. It's been so fun and interactive. So yeah.
Yes. So Docker RMI, Yannick, that's to remove the image as opposed to the container, the instance. Yeah. So our podcast, yes, it's nice that there's a few of us that have sort of adopted streaming as a means to sort of share and disseminate information. Thank you for everyone that stopped by. I think we'll put a bow on it here because it seems to me that nobody's coming forward with an idea for an app that they want to containerize right now, but you know where to find us, and we would be more than happy to help you tackle something more complicated or something as simple of your own. Maybe a different language, maybe a full web app. I know that our podcast, who's in the chat here, has some very sophisticated R apps sitting on top of the Shiny framework for data science web apps and machine learning and what have you. So you know where to come. We look forward to hearing from you, and we will see you the same time next week when we'll be talking about community and culture. And if you're not following this channel, get followed now, because I'm going to do some ad hoc streams next week. So stay awake and pay attention. You never quite know when they're going to be coming.
That'll be fun.
Right. And with that, I'll call it a day, shall we?
Yeah, well, thank you everybody for joining. It was really fun. This is super awesome. So we will see you next week. Martin, where can we find you?
You can find me at m_wimpress on Twitter. What about you?
And you can find me at PSVANN on Twitter, or at SlimDevOps on Twitter. That's our company.
SlimDevOps comes to all of us that like to speak to you. So yeah, follow there as well. And with that, we'll see you next time. Thanks very much for coming.
Thanks all.